Hey, what's going on? It's almost Christmas, but sometimes it doesn't feel like it. We've got so much going on that we feel disconnected from God. There's so much bad stuff going on in the world today, from a really awful election to the pandemic, to people that are still struggling financially just to put food on the table. How are we supposed to get through Christmas and all these wonderful holidays and be joyful and happy when it doesn't seem like any of it makes sense? Where's God's will in all of this for any of us? Are we supposed to suffer like this? Is this part of God's plan for us to struggle like this? Well, I'm going to talk about Joseph a little bit today and the path that he took right after Jesus was born, and how that can teach us to really put our faith and trust in God, even when the circumstances seem really bad. Hi, I'm Chad Torres from Directional Faith, where my goal is to help you find faith with a purpose and to learn to discern God's will for your life. And today we're going to be talking about St. Joseph being led to Egypt and then back again, and why that seemed like a really disastrous situation for them. Jesus was a young boy at that time. He was probably only a year or two old when they had to make that decision, and they still were able to find God's will for their life anyway. And how do we know that? We read Matthew 2. When we read Matthew, there's a little bit of the story about Herod and his jealousy over Jesus and how he tried to kill Jesus. That forced Joseph to take his family and flee to Egypt. Joseph was guided by God through an angel to take Jesus and Mary and flee to Egypt. And of course, that seems disastrous. Here's this king, this savior that has come to save mankind, and they're fleeing to Egypt. How could that be part of God's plan? They were singly being targeted by the highest ruler of that land, well, next to the Romans anyways, and they still had to flee. How could that be part of God's plan? If Jesus was supposed to come and be a leader for all of the Jewish nation, why would he have to leave? Why would he have to run like that? It just didn't seem like it was God's plan. And I'm sure that Joseph felt then the way you and I feel right now. As we're facing all these struggles and we're facing the pandemic and everything going on, we're probably struggling to figure out what is the plan in all this. And I'm sure Joseph felt the same way. But Joseph didn't hesitate. Joseph followed God's will completely, and he took Mary and Jesus and he fled to Egypt with them. He did exactly what God had commanded him to do. Now, of course, we know that's not the end of the story. That's not where it ends. They didn't just run to Egypt and stay there and that's what happened. We know that they came back. Well, just as God guided them to flee to Egypt, God also let them know when it was time to come back. God was continuing to guide them through each one of these steps and let them know that it was okay to make certain decisions. And as we continue to read Matthew 2, we also find out that Joseph, as he was coming back, was still afraid of Herod's son, even though Herod had died by this point, and that's why it was okay for him to come back. He was still afraid of Herod's son. So he took Jesus and he went to Nazareth with him. Now, why is this important? Because there was a prophecy stating that the Messiah would be a Nazarene, somebody from Nazareth. So in order for Jesus to be a Nazarene, he had to go to Nazareth. So when we look at this whole big picture, it seems like Joseph was led way out of his way to go all the way to Egypt just to eventually make his way to Nazareth. Why is it that God couldn't just send him directly to Nazareth? Why couldn't it be just an easy way to get there? And that's just something that we don't know. But in the end, when you look at it, it was God's will all along. All these difficulties and struggles that they faced at the time seemed unsurmountable to them. But when they followed God's will, everything worked out just fine. And so when we look at everything going on in our lives, it may seem like everything's stacked against us. We might be facing the loss of a job, but maybe that's an opportunity for you to find something even better. Maybe you've struggled with your health lately because of the pandemic, but that's giving you an opportunity to grow closer to God. Or maybe you've lost a relationship, but that's going to open you up to meet somebody that you were meant to be with the whole time. Sometimes God's plan for us isn't this direct path that we want it to be. We have to follow it where it leads us, even if it takes us to Egypt and back. It may not seem like it, but by following God's will and going way out of his way, Joseph was able to fulfill not only his call for his life, but also help fulfill major prophecies that would lead to the salvation of the world. And as we begin to celebrate this Christmas, I know that you're still struggling. I know that you're still facing a mountain of challenges, but stick with it. Follow God's plan and God's will for your life. No matter how difficult it may seem, I promise you that God has greater plans for you in the end. So I hope that you're able to find some joy and peace this Christmas, even in the midst of all this struggle. If you want to continue joining me on this journey of finding God's will for your life, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Merry Christmas and God bless.